Smissmas 2023 is here, yay! We've got hats, we've got taunts, we got maps, and we got way too many unusual effects. 31? Valve is clearly doing their part to put the Christ in Christmas because Jesus Christ, dude. Okay, so what's the damage here? Well, much like Halloween, we got no war paint case, which I think is a shame considering just how popular and really good the summer case was. So I think this was an opportunity to return to the glory days of winter 2017, but oh well, what can you do? The cosmetics are mostly good. The heyday of tacky Christmas garbage seems to be well in the past, and we even got a few cosmetics that aren't even winter themed at all, let alone Christmas themed. This soldier beanie beard combo that has a style that lets you look like Santa is the closest we got to anything explicitly Christmas themed in terms of hats, so that's a good step in the right direction. A few of the cosmetics seem kind of forgettable to me, outside of a handful that are pretty great, like this beanie version of that elite grade bucket hat, this really nice spy coat, this soldier coat, this absolutely outstanding Hans Get the Flammenwerfer pyro set that I showcased in my last workshop review, which I think is one of the best sets we've gotten in years, hands down, and this Columbo Engineer set, which, while I do think it looks good, I stand by my criticism of it that the paint region being the entire shirt is too much. Team recognition issues aside, which, hey, time will tell if there's a bullshit loadout that lets you trick people into thinking you're on the wrong team as long as you buy a color similar to Slate by the bucket load, I just think that giant paint regions look ugly. It's a good looking cosmetic, but now it's one that the player base is going to need to use responsibly when the responsibility of making sure it didn't have a giant ass paint region on it was on the people who made it in the first place. Overall, I think this is one of the better winter cosmetic cases we've gotten recently, but I think that mostly just speaks of how bad winter cosmetic cases have been, where a group of largely inoffensive and somewhat forgettable cosmetics blows some of these pieces of garbage out of the water. The taunts, I think, are fine. The two of them were easily some of the most popular taunts on the workshop, so they were bound to get in. Though I think there's something to be said about taunts that go on for just a bit too long. If your taunt isn't going to be looping and cancelable, then I'd like it to be quick and snappy. There's a reason I have the saxophone taunt for Sniper bound to my first taunt slot. It's flashy, rubs it in your face, and it's over in like 3 seconds. Overall, the taunts are fine, nothing egregious, I certainly don't hate them, but I honestly don't see myself using them either. I don't have much need for my scout to let people know that they've made a technical foul. Now let's talk about the real stars of the show here, maps and unusual effects, because I have the most to say about these topics. I'll start with maps because I have more positives to say about those, starting with the fact that I think they should exist for the most part. It seems like everyone knew that Krampus was the big ticket map here. The man himself even got onto the main menu of the game in celebration of this new map, and yeah, the hype around it is well warranted. This to me is an ideal old school TF2 boss map. It's kind of like Iaduct, except if the Horseman was the boss of it, and there was no truce, and that's a pretty solid commendation. This festive version of Turbine is another map that got a bit of hubbub before it was even accepted. It's tacky, noisy, kinda ugly, and is so much better than regular Turbine that it's actually kind of sad. You have all this shit in the middle point that blocks off sniper sight lines, and makes approaching the other team's base much more doable. And overall turns the map from a 10,000 hour sniper main's playground into a map where heavy is actually a playable class. It is still ultimately a CTF map though, so, you know, fun. Brew is an interesting map. It isn't winter themed, which is nice, so it's probably going to go in the year-round pool, but something about it just seemed kind of off while I was playing it. I think it's just how much open space there is, or at least useless space. A lot of it just kind of served to confuse me while I was playing on the map. Also, I thought these guitars on the wall here were a reference to Team Fabulous 2, but I checked the video. The engineer uses a different electric guitar in the ending. Maybe it is a reference and they only had the model from the Shred Alert available to use. I don't know. I'll have to play on the map a bit more to really get a feel for it, but I have mixed first impressions as it stands.
Why use sword when have sharp glass?
Carrier is kind of like a snowy crasher, where instead of a giant zombie, you turn into a giant MVM robot, and instead of CTF, it's attack defend, and only the attacking team can have the robot. The robot is the only one who's allowed to cap the points, meaning the game boils down to how willing is the blue team to stack a fuckload of medics in order to win the game for free. This is a massive pull, but what this ended up reminding me of the most is Star Mod. Back in the day, Star had this mod that basically changed the entire game from the ground up, and one of the changes made was that there was only one heavy allowed per team, and he was a huge hulking robot that moved really slowly, but hit like a truck. So fun for when you get to play heavy, not so much for everything else. which is kind of the same problem I have with this map and also Crasher, especially when you have to just sit around and wait for your chance to be the big boy. What? That's bullshit! What? I waited! I was a good boy! I'd kind of hoped that the game mode change would be an improvement over Crasher CTF, but not really. It kind of makes it a lot worse considering the fact that the game seems very much so in favor of the attackers, which is very unlike most attack-defend maps. If you ask me, this map needed a lot more polish. Hacksaw is a snowy reskin of Bonesaw. You remember Bonesaw, the Halloween payload race map with the saw carts? Of course you don't. It's not a particularly well-remembered map, but at least this version doesn't have spells and crit pumpkins and a fucking parkour course, so hey, bonus points I guess. I still don't want to play on it again. Snow Tower is genuinely one of the worst, if not the single worst map that isn't fucking Whatville that has ever been added in a very long time. It's literally just a high tower reskin, except now it's King of the Hill and it's snowy because of course it is. Now you might be wondering, what's so wrong with that? Well, at first that's what I thought too, and then I played the map. It was an interesting experience to see the meta rapidly evolve over the course of the couple rounds I've played. First, everyone realized that 80% of the map was completely worthless and getting to the point was as simple as a single rocket jump or jetpack boost. So soldiers and pyros were common. Then to counter that, the enemy team stacked a bunch of heavies onto the point, which encouraged us to have more snipers. And then I saw this. No! They would fucking not. There's no way they added a sightline from inside of spawn to the only point on them. They did! They made High Tower even less fun to play on against snipers. How the fuck do you even do that? If I wasn't so out of practice and actually hitting my shots, I would have single-handedly shut down this entire server, and there would be nothing the enemy team could do about it, because making myself effectively untouchable is as simple as the press of the S key. This sightline alone makes this one of the worst maps I have ever seen. At least Whatville gave you sightline variety, which is a backhanded compliment, but it's true. Here, you literally just stand and spawn and wait for people to try and play the game. This is it. This is the meme. Everyone who hates Sniper to an unreasonable degree, congratulations! You now have your very own map that specifically exists for your own confirmation bias. I guess Valve really is listening. Harp is an interesting one. It's basically a fusion of CTF and CP. We'll call it CTP. It's a lot like Carrier, except instead of a giant robot, it's whoever is holding the intelligence who's the only one able to cap. I think this is a pretty interesting take on the standard attack-defend formula. It basically turns one person into a VIP point capturer without turning them into a giant monster that you have to wait for around 5 minutes to become one yourself. In practice, it can be very jarring because captures are now instant. As soon as you get the case at the point, boom, points captured. And this can make what would otherwise be a suicidal rush be extremely profitable. And of course, just like with normal CTF, if you're killed while carrying the case, it gets dropped and goes on a timer before it returns to the base. This can create some interesting scenarios where the case is dropped in a bad position, so waiting out the timer for it to respawn is the smart move. But since this is a game mode with an actual time limit, that has serious consequences. It's actually pretty cool. New hybrid game mode aside, the map is pretty choky, has a lot of death pits, and could arguably do with some rebalancing. But honestly, as far as the potential year-round maps go, it's the best one I've covered so far. That's worrying. Galleria dares to ask the question of, what if Nucleus was player destruction and also you couldn't see what was going on? There is loads of detail put into this map. Arguably too much detail. It's so noisy to the point where multiple times I was being shot at by a sentry and had no idea where from. Nucleus is already not one of my favorite maps, but for different reasons. And this doesn't do much better, if at all. Camber is actually pretty good. The map it reminds me of most is Upward, with maybe a little bit of Cactus Canyon mixed in there for good measure. This one feels the most like a normal, non-objectionable map. Good job. I can actually see myself playing on this one and enjoying it year-round, so yeah, this is a very good addition to the game as far as I'm concerned. The sightlines are about what you'd expect from most payload maps, and the last point is actually fairly reasonable to push while still giving the defending team a good hold. Very nice. And finally, Aemerge seems fine, I guess, but I couldn't get any good footage for it. Any game I was in lasted 2 seconds or was being completely rolled by Stabby because that's just my luck, I guess. I'm sure it's fine. It seems normal, and that's all I can ask for at this point. So yeah, those are the maps. There's fucking 10 of them, and out of all of them, there's one I will absolutely play on year-round unless there's some kind of glaring flaw I just didn't notice. One I will definitely play during Smissmas season, so 1 month out of the year. 2 that are in a weird limbo state of being maybe good and maybe bad that I'll have to experiment with more. 1 that I'm convinced just doesn't like me specifically, and 5 that I couldn't care less whether they were added or not. So yeah, 50-50, not a great turnout. This is the main issue with maps that I've been having lately. There's just too goddamn many of them. Updates used to not ship with very many maps, and that always made them feel a lot more special. Getting a new map used to be a big deal, and they were almost always high quality. You don't count Junction. Holiday maps were even more extreme, with us only getting 1 per year, but that made it feel so much more special. And Krampus does a good job of capturing that old spirit, but I honestly think it's kind of brought down by just the sheer volume of other maps. Summer this year was an exception to the classic map trend, but to me, it kind of felt like they were making up for lost time. It had been 6 years since the last major update, so adding a bunch of new maps made sense. It was like all the maps were updates we could have gotten in that time frame. What I didn't realize was this was going to become the new standard. Halloween added a bunch of maps, as did Smissmas with the 10 we just got. In just this year, we have gotten a staggering 36 maps added to the game. That is a fuckload in technical terms, and a lot of them are holiday restricted. All of the Halloween maps are, and most of the Smissmas maps will be too. The game is getting bloated with maps, most of which you can't even play on anyway outside of a couple months out of the year, so it feels like, what's the point? Especially when so many of those new maps and these new custom VScript game modes aren't even good. It's so telling that the most positive comment I see repeated in regards to the new maps chosen was what wasn't chosen. Like, thank God they had the common sense to not add prop hunt. That's a fucking relief. I'm glad that the maps I enjoyed were good, but needing to throw 10 maps at the wall just for a handful to stick is just not the best strategy moving forward, I don't think. I would so much rather see a small handful of maps added per update compared to a giant swarm of them all at once, especially when a lot of them are so buggy on launch. And that brings us to the last item on our hit list. Unusuals. We don't need any more. There are already way too many unusual effects in the game as it stands, even before this update came out. And this update just added 30 fucking 1. No, what on earth are you doing? Now, granted, half of these are taunt effects, and one of those is actually what I would probably consider one of the better taunt effects in the game, if not the best one we've gotten. This is really good. I like how it accentuates the fact that it's a taunt. It's basically showing off. But Jesus Christ, there's just so many. And it's the same issue as the map bloat. Most of them aren't even all that good. It's just the same generic shit with 15 different colored variants because the unusual market isn't flooded enough with samey looking effects. Now we need samey looking effects all in the same looking swath of colors. Fuck, man. Maybe it would piss off trader mains out there, but I'd much rather see older unusual effects that are exclusive to older crates get reused for newer cases. I'd be way happier with that than seeing 30 new effects every update that either look incredibly generic or like I wish I never looked at them to begin with. Maybe I'm crazy here, but having never been the biggest unusual guy in the world to begin with, I think I've had just about enough of these new effects. No more, please. So, that's the update. A fairly good cosmetic case, some decent taunts, a mixed bag of maps ranging from good to borderline unplayable, and a plague of new unusual effects that the game sorely does not need. Overall, I would describe this update as largely inoffensive. This is about the bare minimum for what a Smissmas update should be, which really speaks volumes about the quality of updates we've been getting lately. I didn't make a video about the Halloween update this year because October made me wish I was dead, but this feels an awful lot like a repeat of that update. Bare minimum quality with too much quantity, and no Warpaint case. I'm not just upset about that because I want my war pants to get into the game. A lot of people on the workshop made way better ones than mine that absolutely deserve to get in. Although it does make me wonder, why did I bother making a tutorial on how to make them if Valve was just going to be like, oh, that's nice, we're not going to add any more this year. Better luck next time. Yeah, better luck next time, I guess. Maybe this video came off a little more negative than I would have liked. I don't know. I think I'm just getting worried that this new standard of throwing so much shit into the game is going to have lasting negative consequences. With so many maps being added, I'm worried that we may just end up with a repeat of Whatville, if we don't already have that with Snow Tower. This is so bad. It's so fucking bad.